Is it possible to follow a structured training plan and still run with your club or training group? Today we're going to talk about 4 challenges you are generally faced with when trying to follow a structured training plan, but also still try and meet your friends, run with your social running group, run with your running club, and how to overcome those challenges. I'm going to hand over to Shona to get us started.
We often get asked this question. We have a lot of members on our platform who are currently using our structured training plans, but who are wanting to go back to their clubs. As we know, we're coming out of a global pandemic and people want to train with their running buddies. They want to go back to training with their clubs, and they're asking this question as to how or can these two coexist together. We believe this can happen. We believe these two things can coexist together. Of course, there's some ins and outs as to how you want to do it and how you want to manipulate things and make sure that you're doing it right so you're not getting injured, you're not overtraining, or equally that you're not undertraining.
Okay, so it is possible. Now, the flexibility of a program is what actually makes this all work. A structured training program has to be flexible. I know that almost sounds a little bit contradictory where we're talking about structure and we're talking about flexibility to a plan, but a training plan shouldn't be rigid. It shouldn't be you have to train on this day, do this kind of session on this day, and there's no movement around that. Our training programs, for example, will have a high intensity session or an interval type session on a Tuesday and then some easy running later in the week. But perhaps your running club has an interval session or a track session on a Thursday. How do we work around this? This is where the flexibility of a training program becomes quite key. You should be able to move things around in the plan and do that track session on a Thursday and maybe do a lighter, easier run on a Tuesday instead. Remember, the idea of following structure has to give you physiological adaptation over time. That's really the goal or the purpose of following a structured training plan towards what your end goal is. However, how you put those puzzle pieces together in each week, week in, week out, is important that you're getting all the puzzle pieces in, but there should be an allowance for you to move a couple of things around. Remember also, running needs to be fun. We do this mostly because we enjoy it, and you don't want your training to become a burden because your plan says you have to do this on a particular day and you're losing out because you can't run with your friends. The flip side to the flexibility, though, as I mentioned, is still having structure and getting all those puzzle pieces in place. We don't want you moving days around where, for example, you're going to run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday if you're on a 4-day-a-week running program, and then the last 3 days of the week are just rest and you're sitting around doing nothing. That, however, does cause problems. You're then not getting adequate recovery between training sessions, and you start to clump things, and then having 3 days at the end of the week recovery, you almost have this train really hard, then recover too much, and that affects the physiological gains and benefits from the training session. Flexibility is key. You want it to fit into your busy lifestyle. You want it to fit in with perhaps your training group or your running club, but you also still do need to keep the general outline or general structure to the plan in order to get the benefits from it.
A lot of the time where we see that these two worlds can't coexist together is really when you are not training at your correct intensity. You are training at the intensity of the group or of the club or whoever you are training with at that point in time. But the key thing here is that for all your sessions, whether it's your interval sessions or your easy and your long run sessions, you need to be training at the intensity that is relative and specific to you. One of the key aspects that you can do here is figure out what that is. So, as an example, for your easy and your long runs, you may want to go and do a threshold test to really work out what your threshold heart rate is, and we can help you then work out what your zone 2 is, and then you are training specifically around your intensity for your easy and your long runs. And equally so for the interval work. You want to be training to your specific intensity, not to necessarily the fastest person in the club or to the slowest person in the club. It needs to be specific to you. One of the things that is that we really need to understand is that, you know, very often clubs may have a sort of group that is running at 6 minutes per K or at 7 minutes per K, and there is nothing wrong in your easy and your long runs to almost just tap down to the slightly slower group, because you are still going to be getting that benefit, but at less cost to your body. And so there are ways and means in terms of how to figure this out specifically for you. So really, if this is something that you are trying to figure out and you want to train with your group, get in touch with the coaches so that they can help you figure out what are your specific intensities, so that you know where to train when you're at your club, and where to sort of put yourself so that you're not training beyond your level or your ability, or you're not training below that either.
Another challenge we're often faced with is your training program might say you need to do 1 kilometer or even 1 mile repeats, and your running club on the night are doing 400-meter track intervals, for example. Quite a difference between the two. How do you incorporate that? Keep in mind, we've spoken about structure to the plan. Keep in mind, we want some flexibility to the plan. But at the end of the day, you are still trying to achieve a physiological response to a certain workload that meets where you are in your training cycle towards your goal. You might be running with your running club and there's 50 people on track in the evening, but each of those 50 people, including yourself, are working towards a different race, a different goal. You might be working towards a marathon, for example, and someone else is working towards a 5K race. There are differences. The kind of intervals that you are doing at those sessions become quite important. We often do recommend, if it's just the camaraderie that you're looking for, the suffering on track with other people around you, we often do then recommend that you still stick to your training plan, so what your prescribed session is for the day, and let the club do theirs. You've got people around you, you're all suffering together. That generally helps. There is also slight adaptations to the physiology of the plans. What I mean by adapting and manipulating the actual interval sessions itself is, if you're doing a 1 kilometer repeat or you're doing a 400 repeat, you can get very similar physiological responses from both those kind of intervals if you just change the intensity of the 400 meter repeats. So I mean intensity in terms of the paces that you're running at, and more importantly, what those rest intervals are between each of those 400 repeats, that will give you a very similar physiological response to what you might get from running 1K repeats. That then means you can go and do that track session with your running club on a particular day, manipulate paces, manipulate intervals, manipulate rest intervals, and get similar responses and still gain the benefits of what you are trying to achieve from a prescribed training session.
If you've watched any of our videos before, you will know that we are massive advocates of strength training, and so many clubs might not take this as seriously, and many clubs do, which I love. And I'm just always so happy when runners are doing strength training at the very least. But again, if you've watched any of our videos, you would have heard me say that it's not just about what you're doing in the strength training. It's not, you could Google running strength and you can get a whole bunch of exercises. There's two key aspects here. The first is how you are doing it, and the second is how that relates to your running. So first up, how you are doing these sessions, how you are doing these exercises. We really want to make sure that your technique is sound, one, to avoid injury, and two, to really get the maximum benefit from those strength sessions. And so if you're doing some strength at your running club, just really make sure that your technique is great and that the person who's leading those strength sessions is qualified to do them and knows exactly what they are doing. I'm very confident that the strength training that we provide at Coach Parry focuses on your technique and the correct technique, but is also scientifically sound. It's scientifically backed, and it's strength training that is specific to running to help keep you injury free and also to help your running performance. That second aspect that I'm talking about is about periodizing your strength specific to your running plan as well. It's really not going to do you any good if you are running and you got your plan set out and all of a sudden you are doing really heavy strength when you should be recovering, or doing really heavy strength where you should be doing a heel session or an interval session. We want the strength and the running to work together. Ideally, we want the strength training to complement the running. We're doing strength training to make our running better and to stay injury free. We're not just doing strength training to look good on the beach and for aesthetic purposes or to become really, really, really strong. If you want to do that, those are slightly different forms of strength training. And so we want to just make sure that the strength training that we do complements our running. And so just making sure that those two things are speaking to each other and that you're periodizing your strength in line with your running program as well.
A question we often get is people want to know their running club is doing a track session on a Thursday night, for example. The training program that they're following has got intervals on a Tuesday. Can they do Tuesday intervals, Thursday intervals, and then maybe do a tempo or a time trial run because the club's doing that on a Sunday or a Saturday? The problem here is cherry picking. You do need to commit to one training plan. The problem is with cherry picking sessions, people often want to do what they find more fun and more often. We obviously don't try and tell you to go and run 2 or 3 interval or speed work type of sessions, higher intensity sessions in the week. It's important to commit to a plan. So if you're following a particular structured training plan and you've got one session in the week that is higher intensity, use the flexibility of the plan that we spoke about, use the manipulation of the intervals that we spoke about, and go and run that session with your club. Don't try and add another session in the week plus another time trial in the week just because your club's doing it, and cherry picking different things from different programs and different structures because it sounds fun. When you start doing things like that, you start working in opposite directions and there's no real end goal in mind. It's really doing things for the sake of doing things because they're available. So just be cautious and careful around cherry picking sessions because they seem fun and you feel I've only got 45 minutes to run today, so let me go and hurt myself as much as I can in an interval session instead of maybe just doing a 45-minute easy run.
In order to have improvements in your running, you have to take into account recovery, right? And many plans do that and they build in recovery weeks because that is absolutely vital. And without those recovery weeks, you're not going to be improving. This is often the problem that we see in big group environments or club environments, is that everyone is training for something different. And so you can't individualize everyone's training plan specific to that. You'll probably land up going to the running club in your recovery week and you're probably going to be running too hard necessarily in an interval session. The big problem with this is getting that alignment or that periodization right. And this video is going to show you how to do that.